Most people think that financial ruin comes from one big catastrophic decision. They imagine someone losing their life savings in a bad investment, or signing a mortgage they couldn't afford, or getting wiped out in some dramatic market crash. And while those things certainly happen, they're not usually how people end up in real financial trouble. The truth is much quieter and much more common. Financial lives are usually destroyed slowly, one small decision at a time, in ways that seem completely harmless when they're happening. And very often it starts with something as simple as $100. Now, $100 doesn't sound like much. It's not enough to buy a car or put a down payment on a house. It won't fund your retirement or send your kids to college. In the moment, spending $100 feels almost trivial, especially if you have a steady income and a few $1,000s sitting in your checking account. But here's what most people don't understand. It's never really about the $100 itself. It's about the behavior that $100 represents and what happens when that behavior becomes a pattern. Because small financial mistakes don't just stay small, they compound, they multiply. They create habits that become harder and harder to break, and over time, those habits shape your entire financial life in ways you never intended. Let me explain what I mean. Imagine you're standing at a checkout counter and you see something you want. Maybe it's a gadget, a nice dinner out, a subscription service, or just something that catches your eye. You think to yourself, it's only $100. I work hard. I deserve this. And you're right, in a way, you do work hard. But what happens next is where the trouble starts. You buy it without really thinking about whether you need it, whether it fits into any kind of plan, or what else that money could have done for you. You just buy it because it feels good in the moment, and $100 doesn't seem like enough to worry about. Now, if this happened once, it wouldn't matter much. But it almost never happens just once. That's the nature of human behavior. When we do something that feels good and doesn't seem to hurt us, we do it again and again. And before long, it's not just $100 once. It's $100 a week, or twice a week, or every few days. Suddenly, you're spending $400 or $500 a month on things you didn't plan for, don't really need, and probably won't remember a few months from now, and that's when the real damage starts to accumulate. You see, the problem isn't just that you're spending money. The problem is what that money could have been doing instead. This is what economists call opportunity cost, and it's one of the most underappreciated concepts in personal finance. Every dollar you spend is a dollar you can't invest. Every dollar you waste is a dollar that can't compound and grow over time. Let's say you're 30 years old, and instead of spending that $100 on something forgettable, you invested it in a simple index fund that returns about 10% a year on average. By the time you're 65, that single $100 would have grown to over $2,000. Now imagine you're doing this every week. That's $5,000 a year. Over 35 years, investing that money instead of spending it could give you well over $1 million. That's not an exaggeration. That's just math. That's compounding at work. But most people never see it that way because the cost is invisible in the moment. When you spend $100, you get something right now. You get the instant gratification, the little dopamine hit, the feeling that you've treated yourself. When you save or invest that $100, you get nothing immediately. You have to wait. You have to trust that patience and discipline will pay off decades from now. And our brains are not wired to value future rewards the way we value immediate ones. This is called present bias, and it's one of the main reasons people make poor financial decisions even when they know better. We're all vulnerable to it, and recognizing that vulnerability is the first step toward making better choices. Now, here's where it gets worse. Let's say you don't actually have that $100 to spend. Maybe your checking account is running a little low, or maybe you've already spent your paycheck on necessary expenses, but you still want the thing and you still feel like you deserve it. So what do? You put it on a credit card. And that's when a $100 mistake starts turning into something much more dangerous. Credit cards are useful tools when used responsibly, but they're also one of the easiest ways to fall into a trap that can take years to escape. When you put that $100 on a credit card and don't pay it off immediately, you're not just spending $100 anymore. You're spending $100 plus interest. And depending on your card's interest rate, that interest can be 15, 20, or even 25% or more. If you only make the minimum payment each month, that $100 can take years to pay off. And by the time you're done, you might have paid $150 or $200 for something that was never worth 100 to begin with. But again, it's rarely just one purchase. It's the pattern. People who habitually spend beyond their means on small things tend to carry balances on their credit cards. Those balances grow. The interest compounds against you instead of for you. And before long, you're stuck in a cycle where you're working just to pay off debt from things you bought months or years ago, things you've probably already forgotten about or thrown away. This is what I call reverse compounding. Instead of your money growing and working for you, your debt is growing and working against you. And the longer it goes on, the harder it becomes to break free. Now, some people will say, well, I'll just pay it off next month. I'll get a bonus or I'll have extra money and I'll take care of it then. But life doesn't usually work that way. Next month, something else comes up. An unexpected expense, another thing you want, another reason to delay. And the debt just sits there growing quietly in the background, taking up space in your financial life and in your mind. Because debt isn't just a financial burden, it's a psychological one too. It creates stress. It limits your options. It makes you feel trapped. And over time, that stress affects your decision-making in other areas of your life. There's another dimension to this that people often overlook, and that's the habit itself. Every time you make an impulsive financial decision, you're reinforcing a habit. You're training your brain to prioritize short-term pleasure over long-term security. You're weakening your ability to delay gratification, to think critically about what you really need versus what you want in the moment. And habits like this don't stay confined to small purchases. They bleed into bigger decisions. If you can't control your spending on a $100 impulse buy, how are you going to handle a decision about whether to buy a car you can't quite afford, or a house that stretches your budget, or a vacation you'll be paying off for months afterward? This is what I mean when I say a $100 mistake can destroy your financial life. It's not the $100, it's the erosion of discipline. It's the gradual normalization of living beyond your means. It's the compound effect of bad habits repeated over and over until they define who you are financially. And the dangerous part is that it all feels so normal. Everyone around you is doing it too. Everyone's buying things they don't need with money they don't have. Consumer culture encourages it. Advertising is designed to make you feel like you're missing out if you don't spend. Social media shows you everyone else's highlight reel, and you start to feel like you need to keep up. So you spend a little more, justify it a little more, and the cycle continues. But here's the good news. Just as bad habits compound into serious problems, good habits compound into serious advantages. If you can recognize this pattern in yourself and start making different choices, even small ones, the benefits will accumulate over time, just like the damage would have. It starts with awareness. You have to be honest with yourself about your spending. You have to track it, understand it, and see where your money is actually going. Most people have no idea. They think they have a general sense of their spending, but when they actually write it down or use an app to track every dollar for a month, they're shocked. The $100 here and there adds up to thousands over the course of a year, often spent on things that he didn't even enjoy or remember. Once you have that awareness, the next step is creating friction between you and impulsive decisions. This doesn't mean depriving yourself of everything you enjoy. It just means adding a pause, a moment of reflection before you spend. One simple rule is to wait 24 hours before making any non-essential purchase over a certain amount. Give yourself time to think about whether you really want it, whether it fits into your priorities, whether it's worth the trade-off of what else that money could do. You'll be surprised how often the urge passes and how often you realize you didn't really want the thing as much as you thought you did in the moment. Another principle is to automate your good financial behavior so that it happens before you have a chance to make a bad decision. Set up automatic transfers to savings or investment accounts right when you get paid. Pay yourself first, as the saying goes. If the money never sits in your checking account tempting you, you can't spend it impulsively. And over time, you won't even miss it because you'll adjust your lifestyle to live on what's left. This is how wealth is actually built, not through lottery wins or get-rich-quick schemes, but through consistent, disciplined saving and investing over long periods of time. You also have to be willing to say no, both to yourself and to others. This is harder than it sounds because we're social creatures and we want to fit in. If your friends are going out to expensive dinners every weekend or taking trips you can't afford, there's pressure to keep up. But real friends will understand if you set boundaries And if they don't, that tells you something important about the relationship. Your financial future is more important than anyone else's opinion of your spending habits. It takes courage to live below your means in a world that constant encourages you to spend more, but that courage pays off in ways that are hard to overstate. There's also something to be said for examining why you're spending in the first place. A lot of impulsive spending is emotional. People shop when they're stressed, bored, sad, or trying to fill some kind of void. They use spending as a coping mechanism, a quick hit of pleasure in an otherwise difficult day. But that pleasure is fleeting, and it doesn't actually solve the underlying problem. If you find yourself spending money to feel better, it's worth asking what you're really trying to fix and whether there are healthier, cheaper ways to address it. Sometimes the $100 mistake isn't really about money at all. It's about using money to avoid dealing with something else. Now, I want to be clear about something. This isn't about living a joyless, miserly life where you never spend money on anything you enjoy. That's not sustainable, and it's not the point. The point is intentionality. It's about making conscious decisions rather than autopilot ones. It's about aligning your spending with your values and your long-term goals rather than just reacting to whatever impulse or advertisement happens to cross your path. There's a big difference between choosing to spend money on something that genuinely enhances your life and thoughtlessly spending money because you didn't pause to consider the alternative. What I've learned over decades of watching people succeed and fail financially is that the winners aren't usually the ones who made one brilliant investment or got lucky. They're the ones who avoided stupid mistakes, who protected themselves from their own worst impulses, who built systems and habits that made good decisions automatic. They're the ones who understood that wealth isn't about how much you earn, it's about how much you keep and what you do with it. You can make a very high income and still end up broke if you spend everything you make. And you can make a modest income and end up financially secure if you live below your means and invest the difference consistently over time. The financial industry doesn't like to talk about this because there's no money in telling people to spend less and be patient. They want you to believe that wealth comes from picking the right stocks, timing the market, or finding some secret strategy that only insiders know about. But the truth is much simpler and much less exciting. It comes from discipline. It comes from saying no to the $100 mistake over and over until saying no becomes easier than saying yes. It comes from understanding that every financial decision is a vote for the kind of life you want to have in the future. And here's the thing that really matters. This isn't just about money. Your relationship with money reflects your relationship with yourself. It reflects your ability to delay gratification, to think long-term, to exercise self-control in a world designed to undermine it. When you master your spending, you're not just building wealth, you're building character. You're proving to yourself that you can make hard choices, that you can resist temptation, that you can prioritize your future self over your present impulses. That's a skill that carries over into every other area of your life. So when I say that a $100 mistake can destroy your financial life, I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to wake you up to something that most people never see until it's too late. Financial ruin doesn't announce itself. It doesn't show up one day and knock on your door. It accumulates quietly, one small decision at a time, until you wake up one day and realize you're stuck. You're in debt, you have no savings, you're living paycheck to paycheck, and you can remember exactly how you got there. It happened so gradually that you didn't notice until the damage was done. But the beautiful thing about understanding this pattern is that you can reverse it just as gradually. You don't have to fix everything overnight. You don't have to make some dramatic lifestyle change that you can't sustain. You just have to start making better choices one at a time and let those choices compound in your favor instead of against you. Skip the impulse purchase today. Put that money somewhere it can grow. Do it again tomorrow and the next day. And over time, you'll look back and realize that those small decisions added up to something significant, not because any one of them was life-changing, but because together, consistently, they built a foundation that changed everything. The investors and business people I admire most aren't the flashy ones making headlines with big bets and dramatic moves. They're the quiet ones who understood early on that success in finance, like success in life, comes from avoiding unnecessary mistakes and letting time do most of the work. They're the ones who recognize that you don't have to be brilliant to build wealth. You just have to be patient, disciplined, and aware of the small things that most people overlook. The $100 mistake is one of those small things. It seems insignificant. It gets ignored. Ignore it long enough, repeat it often enough, and it becomes the defining characteristic of your financial life. So pay attention to your small decisions. Notice when you're about to spend money impulsively. Ask yourself if it's really worth it. Think about what else that money could do. And remember that financial freedom doesn't come from one big windfall. It comes from thousands of small, smart decisions compounded over time. That's how fortunes are built. That's how financial stress is avoided. And that's how you protect yourself from the $100 mistake that so many people make without ever realizing the damage it's doing. Your financial life is built one decision at a time. Make those decisions count.